pay very close attention to what you are about to hear, because this is not a motivational speech. This is not a feel-good talk designed to make you comfortable. What you are about to absorb in the next hour is the kind of knowledge that was deliberately hidden from you, not because it is forbidden, but because it is dangerous. Dangerous to those who use it recklessly, and even more dangerous to those who never learn it at all. Ask yourself this: why does the world seem to reward people who appear cold, calculated, and strategic, while those who are kind, open, and honest are repeatedly crushed beneath the weight of their own naivety? That question is not rhetorical. It demands an answer. And Niccolò Machiavelli gave that answer over 500 years ago. His words still pulse through the veins of every corporation, every government, every social hierarchy you have ever encountered. And yet, you were never taught them. That was not an accident. That was the strategy. Right now, in this very moment, someone is making a decision about your life. A boss is deciding whether you deserve that promotion. A partner is evaluating whether you are worth their loyalty. A stranger is sizing you up in a room full of people, measuring your posture, your silence, your energy. And in every single one of those moments, you are either the one being moved across the board, or you are the one moving the pieces. There is no neutral ground. There never was. You just believed there was because neutrality felt safe. But Machiavelli understood something that most people spend their entire lives denying. The world is not a garden of cooperation. It is a chessboard of power. And every single person on that board is playing, whether they admit it or not. Let me paint a picture for you. You walk into a meeting at work. You have prepared. You have ideas. You have value. But the person who speaks the loudest, the one who controls the room with their presence, not with their knowledge, walks away with the credit. You sit there, burning inside, wondering why merit does not seem to matter. You go home. You replay the moment. You tell yourself that next time will be different. But next time is never different, because you keep playing by rules that were designed to keep you small. You keep believing that if you just work harder, if you are just more honest, if you just give more of yourself, the world will eventually recognize your worth. It will not. Not because you lack value, but because value without strategy is invisible. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that it is much safer to be feared than loved if one has to choose. Most people hear that and recoil. They think it sounds cruel. They think it sounds heartless. But you are not most people. You are here because something inside you already knows the truth. You have felt it in the moments when kindness was weaponized against you. You have felt it when someone took your trust and used it as a lever to push you down. You have felt it when you gave someone your loyalty and received nothing in return but silence and indifference. The problem is not that you are weak. The problem is that you have been operating with an incomplete map of reality. You have been navigating a battlefield with a tourist guide. You were taught to share, to be fair, to wait your turn, to trust the process. And all of those lessons, every single one, were taught to you by people who either did not understand the game or who benefited from you not understanding it. Think about that. The rules you follow were handed to you by people who had something to gain from your obedience. Machiavelli saw this with ruthless clarity. He observed the courts of Italy, the wars between city-states, the alliances built on sand and shattered by ambition. He watched princes rise and fall, not because of their armies, but because of their ability to read the invisible currents of human nature. And what he discovered was not pleasant, it was not comforting, but it was true. And truth, when it arrives stripped of decoration, always feels like a blade. Here is the first truth you must absorb. The world does not operate on fairness. It operates on perception. The person who controls how they are perceived controls the room. The person who controls the room controls the outcome. And the person who controls the outcome controls their destiny. This is not theory. This is the operating system of reality. Every politician who has ever won an election understood this. Every CEO who has ever dominated a market understood this. Every person who has ever walked into a room and commanded attention without saying a word understood this. Perception is the currency of power, and most people are bankrupt. You have spent your life being authentic. You have worn your emotions on your face, spoken your mind without filter, revealed your plans before they were formed. And every time you did, you handed ammunition to anyone watching, not because they were evil, but because human nature is not built on trust. It is built on self-interest. Machiavelli did not invent this truth. He simply refused to look away from it. He wrote that men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. Read that again in your mind. Let it settle. The world is full of deceivers, not because deception is rare, but because the willingness to be deceived is abundant. People want to believe. They want to trust. They want to assume the best. And that desire, that beautiful, human, tragic desire, is the very thing that makes them vulnerable. Now, I am not telling you to become a liar. I am not telling you to become a manipulator. That is the shallow reading of Machiavelli, the one repeated by people who have never actually read his work. What I am telling you is something far more profound. I am telling you to become aware, to open your eyes to the dynamics that have been governing your life without your consent, to see the game as it actually is, not as you wish it were. Because once you see it, once you truly see the invisible architecture of power that surrounds every interaction, every relationship, every decision, you will never be a pawn again. Consider the concept of strategic silence. Most people fill silence with words because silence makes them uncomfortable. They chatter, they explain, they justify, they overshare, and in doing so, they reveal their insecurities, their desires, their fears. Every word you speak that is not necessary is a thread someone can pull to unravel you. Machiavelli understood that silence is not emptiness. Silence is a weapon. When you are silent in a room full of noise, you become the most powerful person in that room. Not because silence is magical, but because silence communicates something that words never can: control. When everyone is scrambling to be heard, the person who sits back and observes is the person who sees the most. They see the alliances forming. They see the weaknesses being exposed. They see the lies being told and the truths being hidden. And they do not react. They wait. They calculate. They choose their moment. And when they finally speak, the room listens. Not because their words are better, but because their words are rare. And rarity creates value. This is the fundamental principle that Machiavelli encoded in his writings. Power is not about force. It is about leverage. It is about understanding what people want, what they fear, and what they will do when pressed. It is about positioning yourself so that you are never desperate, never reactive, never at the mercy of someone else's agenda. The desperate person is the weakest person in any room. They will agree to anything. They will sacrifice their dignity, their principles, their future, just to relieve the pressure of the present moment, and everyone around them can sense it. Desperation has a smell. It leaks through your voice, your posture, your eyes. It tells the world that you can be bought cheaply, and the world always buys cheaply when it can. So here is what you're going to learn in this next hour. You are going to learn the strategies that have governed empires, corporations, and the most powerful individuals who have ever lived. You are going to learn why certain people seem to move through life with an invisible force field around them, untouched by the chaos that destroys others. You are going to learn how to read people the way Machiavelli read the courts of Florence, with precision, with detachment, and with an understanding so deep that their next move becomes obvious before they even make it. But I must warn you, This knowledge comes with a cost. Once you see the world through this lens, you cannot unsee it. You will notice things you never noticed before. You will see the manipulation in conversations you once thought were innocent. You will recognize the power plays in relationships you once thought were equal. You will understand why certain people in your life have always seemed to have the upper hand, and you will realize that it was never because they were better than you. It was because they understood what you are only now beginning to grasp. The ancient Romans had a phrase, si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. This is not a call to aggression. It is a call to readiness. The person who is prepared for conflict is the person who rarely experiences it. Because preparation radiates outward. It changes how you carry yourself. It changes the energy you bring into a room. It changes the way people treat you, not through intimidation, but through respect. And respect, true respect, is never given freely. It is earned by those who demonstrate that they cannot be easily moved, easily swayed, or easily broken. Machiavelli observed that fortune is like a river. When it is calm, everyone stands on its banks and admires the view. But when it floods, it destroys everything in its path. The wise person, he argued, builds levees during the calm. They prepare their defenses when there is no enemy at the gate. They sharpen their blade when there is no battle to fight. Because by the time the flood arrives, by the time the enemy appears, by the time the crisis erupts, it is already too late to prepare. You must be ready before the world demands it of you. And most people are not ready. Most people live their entire lives in reactive mode, stumbling from crisis to crisis, wondering why nothing ever seems to go their way. You are not going to be most people. Not after this. If you have understood even a fraction of what has been said so far, then something inside you has already shifted. A door has cracked open, and behind that door is a version of you that the world has not yet met. A version that does not beg for approval. A version that does not flinch when challenged. A version that moves through the world with the quiet, calculated precision of someone who knows exactly what they are doing and why. Stay with me. Because what comes next will change the way you see every interaction, every relationship, and every decision you make for the rest of your life. The game has always been playing. You are just now learning the rules. Let me take you deeper. Because surface understanding is the enemy of true power. You have heard the word strategy thrown around in boardrooms and self-help books like it is just another buzzword. But strategy, real strategy, the kind Machiavelli practiced and preached, is not a technique. It is a way of seeing. It is the ability to look at a situation and see not what is happening, but what is about to happen. To see not what people are saying, but what they mean. To see not what they want you to see, but what they are desperately trying to hide. Think about the last time someone deceived you, not a stranger, someone close, a friend, a colleague, a partner. Before the deception was revealed, there were signs. There are always signs. A shift in tone, a change in routine, words that did not quite match actions, eyes that looked away a fraction of a second too long. You felt something was off. Your instinct told you, but you overrode that instinct because you wanted to believe the best. You chose comfort over truth, and that choice cost you. Machiavelli would tell you that this is the most common and most costly error a person can make, choosing what they wish to be true over what actually is. He called it the gap between how men live and how they ought to live. And he said that anyone who ignores what is actually done in favor of what should be done will bring about their own destruction. Those are not gentle words. They are not meant to be. They are a slap across the face of your illusions. And you need that slap. Because the illusions are killing you slowly, one compromise at a time, one betrayal at a time, one moment of blind trust at a time. Let me tell you about the fox and the lion. Machiavelli used this metaphor to describe the two essential qualities of anyone who wishes to survive and thrive in a world governed by power. The lion is strong, fearless, and direct. It charges at its enemies and overwhelms them with force. But the lion, for all its power, walks into traps. It does not see the snare hidden beneath the leaves. It does not anticipate the ambush waiting beyond the ridge. The fox, on the other hand, sees every trap. It senses danger before it arrives. It moves with caution, with intelligence, with cunning. But the fox, for all its cleverness, cannot fight off the wolves when they come in packs. The lesson is this: you must be both. You must have the strength of the lion and the cunning of the fox. You must know when to charge and when to retreat, when to roar and when to whisper, when to strike and when to wait. Most people are neither. They are sheep. They follow the herd because it feels safe. They do what everyone else does because independent thought requires courage, and courage requires a willingness to stand alone, and standing alone is the one thing that most people cannot bear. They would rather be wrong with the crowd than right by themselves. Machiavelli saw this weakness in humanity and did not judge it. He simply used it. He understood that the person who can stand alone, who can think independently, who can resist the pull of the crowd, holds an almost supernatural advantage over those who cannot. You feel it, do you not? That pull. The desire to fit in. The need to be liked. The fear that if you say what you really think, if you do what you really want, if you become who you really are, the world will reject you. That fear has been your invisible cage. It has kept you small. It has kept you obedient. It has kept you playing a character that the world approves of, instead of becoming the person you were meant to be. And Machiavelli, from across the centuries, is telling you to break the cage, not with anger, not with rebellion for its own sake, but with intelligence, with calculated, deliberate, strategic action. The person who breaks free from the need for approval becomes immune to the most common form of control: social pressure. Think about how many decisions you have made, not because they were right for you, but because you were afraid of what others would think. How many times you agreed when you wanted to disagree. How many times you stayed silent when you wanted to speak. How many times you said yes when every fiber of your being screamed no. Each of those moments was a small surrender, a tiny abdication of your sovereignty, and over time, those small surrenders accumulated into a life that does not belong to you. A life shaped by the expectations of others. A life lived in a cage built from the opinions of people who do not even think about you when you leave the room. Machiavelli was not writing for the faint-hearted. He was writing for those who were willing to face the world as it is and to forge their own path through it. He was writing for people like you. People who have been burned by trust and are ready to transform that pain into power. People who have been overlooked and are ready to become impossible to ignore. People who have lived their entire lives playing by someone else's rules and are finally ready to write their own. If you have followed me this far, if these words have struck something deep inside your chest, then you are ready for what comes next. Because everything I have shared so far is merely the foundation. The architecture of power is vast, and we have only begun to lay the first stones. In the next section, I will reveal the specific characteristics that separate those who hold power from those who are crushed by it. I will show you the exact traits that Machiavelli identified as essential for anyone who wishes to rise above the mediocre masses and claim their rightful place at the table of influence. If you understood this, stay sharp, because the coldest move is yet to come. Now that the veil has been lifted, now that you have seen the first glimpse of the machinery that runs beneath the surface of every human interaction, it is time to go deeper. Because awareness without depth is just paranoia, and paranoia serves no one. What serves you is understanding. Cold, clear, precise understanding of the forces that shape who wins and who loses in the great game of life. Machiavelli did not write for philosophers locked in their towers. He wrote for men and women in the arena, covered in dust and blood, fighting not for glory, but for survival. And what he revealed were not abstract theories. They were patterns. Patterns of human behavior so consistent, so predictable, that once you learn to read them, the world becomes a different place entirely. Let us begin with the first trait of those who truly hold power: emotional sovereignty. This is not emotional suppression. It is not the absence of feeling. It is something far more refined. It is the ability to feel everything and show nothing. To burn with rage inside while presenting a face of perfect calm to the world. To feel the sting of betrayal and respond not with tears or fury, but with calculated, deliberate action. The emotionally sovereign person is the most dangerous person in any room, not because they do not feel, but because their feelings never control their actions. They use emotion as fuel, not as a compass. They feel the fire, but they choose where to aim it. Think about the people you admire, the ones who seem untouchable, the ones who walk through storms without getting wet. What do they all have in common? It is not that they are made of stone. It is that they have mastered the art of the interior fortress. Inside, they are as human as anyone. They feel pain. They feel doubt. They feel the pull of desire and the weight of fear. But none of it leaks. None of it seeps through the walls they have built around their reactions. And those walls are not built from denial. They are built from discipline. From the daily, relentless practice of choosing response over reaction, of pausing before speaking, of observing before acting, of thinking 3 moves ahead while everyone else is scrambling to understand the move that just happened. Machiavelli wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. This is not a license to be fake. This is a recognition of the deepest truth about human interaction. People do not respond to who you are. They respond to who they perceive you to be. And perception is something you can shape, mold, and control. The person who understands this is playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. They are not deceiving the world. They are curating what the world gets to see. There is a vast difference between the two. A deceiver hides the truth. A strategist presents the truth in its most powerful form. The second trait is strategic patience. In a world that worships speed, in a culture that glorifies instant results and overnight success, patience has become almost revolutionary. But Machiavelli knew that timing is everything. He observed that many princes who seemed destined for greatness were destroyed not by their enemies, but by their own impatience. They struck too soon. They revealed their hand too early. They moved before the board was set in their favor. And the world swallowed them whole. Strategic patience is not passivity. Let me be absolutely clear about that. Passivity is the absence of action driven by fear. Strategic patience is the deliberate delay of action driven by wisdom. The passive person waits because they do not know what to do. The strategically patient person waits because they know that the right moment has not yet arrived. They watch. They gather information. They let their opponents make mistakes. They let the situation develop until the perfect opening appears. And then, when they move with devastating precision. One strike. One move. One word at the right moment that changes everything. Think about the predator in the wild. The lion does not chase every zebra it sees. It watches the herd. It identifies the weakest, the most isolated, the one that has strayed too far from the group. It positions itself downwind. It waits. It endures the discomfort of stillness. And then, in one explosive burst of motion, it strikes. Not with desperation, not with hope, with certainty. That is strategic patience in its purest form. And you must cultivate it if you wish to stop being the zebra. The third trait is the mastery of information. Machiavelli was obsessed with intelligence, not in the academic sense, but in the military sense, the gathering, analysis, and strategic deployment of information. He understood that the person who knows the most controls the most, not the person who talks the most, not the person who appears the most confident. The person who has the deepest understanding of the situation, the players, the stakes, and the hidden motivations is the person who holds the real power. Everyone else is just making noise. In your life, this translates directly. How much do you really know about the people around you? Not surface-level knowledge, not their favorite foods or their weekend hobbies. Do you know what they fear? Do you know what they desire above all else? Do you know what keeps them awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, drowning in anxiety? Because that knowledge is power. Not power to exploit, power to navigate, power to understand why people do what they do, so that you are never caught off guard, so that you can anticipate their moves before they make them, so that when they try to use you, you see it coming from a mile away and step aside while they stumble into the trap they set for you. Machiavelli said that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. This applies to you as well. Look at your inner circle. Look at the 5 people you spend the most time with. Are they strategic? Are they ambitious? Are they the kind of people who sharpen your mind and push you to be better? Or are they comfortable? Are they complacent? Are they the kind of people who drag you back down every time you try to rise? Your circle is not neutral. It is either a forge or a cage. It is either making you harder and sharper, or it is making you soft and dependent. Machiavelli chose his advisors with ruthless precision. He did not surround himself with those who told him what he wanted to hear. He surrounded himself with those who told him the truth, even when the truth was ugly. Because the person who is surrounded by flatterers is the person who is most easily destroyed. The 4th trait is what I call calculated generosity. This may surprise you. In a discussion about power and strategy, generosity might seem out of place. But Machiavelli understood something that most people do not. Generosity, when deployed strategically, is one of the most powerful weapons in existence. The person who gives wisely creates debt, not financial debt, psychological debt. When you do something genuinely valuable for someone without being asked, without expecting anything in return, you plant a seed in their mind. That seed grows into obligation, into loyalty, into a willingness to reciprocate that goes far beyond what you originally gave. But here is the key. The generosity must be visible, it must be valuable, and it must be unexpected. Generosity that is expected becomes entitlement. Generosity that is invisible has no strategic value, and generosity that is cheap is worse than not giving at all, because it reveals you as someone who is trying to buy influence on a budget. Machiavelli observed that princes who were known for generosity often ended up impoverished, not because generosity was wrong, but because they gave without strategy. They gave to everyone. They gave constantly. They gave until they had nothing left. And then, when they could no longer give, the very people they had enriched turned against them. The lesson is not to be stingy. The lesson is to be deliberate. Give when it creates maximum impact. Give to those who will remember. Give in ways that demonstrate your abundance, not your desperation. The truly powerful person gives like a king, not because they have to, but because they can. And every gift is a stone laid in the foundation of an empire. Now, let us talk about application, because theory without practice is the refuge of cowards. In the professional environment, these traits manifest in specific ways. The emotionally sovereign person does not react when a colleague takes credit for their work. They note it, they file it, and they create a situation where their contribution becomes undeniable on its own terms. They do not fight for recognition. They make recognition inevitable. The strategically patient person does not demand a promotion. They position themselves so that the promotion becomes the only logical choice. They build relationships with decision-makers. They take on visible projects. They deliver results that speak louder than any request ever could. And when the time comes, when the opportunity presents itself, they step into it as if it were always theirs, because in their mind, it always was. In personal relationships, these principles are equally potent. The person who masters emotional sovereignty does not chase after someone who has pulled away. They do not text repeatedly. They do not beg for attention. They do not lower themselves to the level of desperation that pushes people further away. Instead, they become a mountain, immovable, unshakable, present but not needy, available but not desperate. And that energy, that calm, grounded, sovereign energy, is magnetic in ways that no amount of pursuit can replicate. People are drawn to those who do not need them. It sounds paradoxical. It sounds cruel. But it is the truth that governs the deepest currents of human attraction. In social interactions, the master of information becomes the person everyone respects, but no one fully understands. They ask questions more than they make statements. They listen with the intensity of a predator tracking its prey. They remember details that others forget. And when they offer an observation, it is so precise, so unexpectedly accurate, that it creates a kind of awe. People think they are reading minds. They are not. They are simply paying attention while everyone else is performing. Machiavelli told us that men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands. In other words, people assess you by what they see, not by what they touch or test. This means that the image you project is not vanity. It is strategy. How you dress, how you stand, how you enter a room, how you hold eye contact, how you shake a hand, how you respond to provocation. Every single one of these moments is a data point in the equation that others are constantly running about you. And most people leave that equation to chance. They walk into rooms without thinking about the energy they bring. They dress without considering the message their appearance sends. They speak without calculating the weight of their words. And then they wonder why they are not taken seriously. You are not going to be that person anymore. From this moment forward, every interaction is an opportunity. Every room is a stage. Every conversation is a negotiation. Not in a cynical sense, not in a manipulative sense, in a strategic sense. In the sense that you are awake now, you see the board, you see the pieces, and you are no longer willing to be moved by forces you do not understand. The fifth trait, perhaps the most crucial of all, is what Machiavelli called virtù. This word does not translate cleanly into English. It is not virtue in the moral sense. It is something more primal, more dangerous. It is the combination of skill, courage, will, and adaptability that allows a person to seize opportunities and bend circumstances to their favor. It is the quality that separates those who are remembered from those who are forgotten, those who shape history from those who are shaped by it. Virtù is the fire inside that refuses to be extinguished. It is the relentless drive to master yourself, to master your environment, to master the invisible forces that govern human behavior, and it cannot be taught in a book. It can only be awakened. And right now, in this moment, it is stirring inside you, but the coldest move is yet to come. Curious to know how all of this translates into exact, surgical tactics you can deploy starting tomorrow. That is precisely what comes next. Before we move on, there is one more thing I need you to understand about these 5 traits. They are not separate skills that you develop in isolation. They are facets of a single diamond. Emotional sovereignty feeds strategic patience. Strategic patience enables the mastery of information. The mastery of information empowers calculated generosity. And calculated generosity creates the conditions for virtue to flourish. They are interconnected. They reinforce each other. And when you begin to develop all 5 simultaneously, Something happens that is difficult to describe, but impossible to miss. You begin to radiate a different kind of energy. People notice it before they can name it. They feel it when you walk into a room. They sense it in the way you hold silence. They see it in the calm, unshakable gaze that never flinches, never wavers, never begs. Machiavelli described this as the quality that made certain princes magnetic, even in defeat. It was not their armies or their wealth. It was the intangible force of their presence, a presence forged in the fire of self-mastery. And this is what separates the discussion we are having from every other piece of content you have ever consumed about power. We are not talking about tricks. We are not talking about lines to memorize or poses to strike. We are talking about a fundamental transformation of who you are at your core, a rewiring of your operating system, a metamorphosis from reactive to strategic, from desperate to sovereign, from visible to enigmatic. Let me tell you about a scenario that will make this concrete. Imagine you are in a social setting, a gathering, a dinner, a party. You notice that someone is dominating the conversation. They are loud, they are gesturing wildly, they are desperate for attention, and they are getting it for now. The room is turned toward them like sunflowers toward a noisy bulb. Now watch what happens. As the evening wears on, the energy shifts. The loud person becomes exhausting. Their stories become repetitive. Their need for the spotlight becomes transparent. And slowly, one by one, eyes begin to wander. They search for something different, something quieter, something more substantial. And that is when they find you, sitting calmly, observing. A slight smile that suggests you know something they do not. You have not competed for attention. You have not performed. You have simply been present with an intensity that is rare. And that rarity is what draws them in. When someone finally approaches you, when they lean in and ask what you think, you do not unleash a flood of opinions. You offer one thought, one precise, considered observation. It cuts through the noise like a blade through silk. And in that moment, you have done something the loud person could never do. You have created intrigue. You have made people want to know more. You have demonstrated that your words have weight because they are scarce. And scarcity, as Machiavelli and every economist after him understood, creates value. This is not a game of pretending to be mysterious. This is the natural result of developing the traits we have discussed. When you are emotionally sovereign, you do not need to perform. When you are strategically patient, you do not rush to fill silence. When you have mastered information, you do not need to prove what you know. When you practice calculated generosity, people come to you. And when you embody virtue, everything you do carries a weight that others cannot replicate. This is the Machiavellian edge. Not manipulation, not cruelty, mastery. Consider the professional arena once more. You are in a negotiation. The other party wants something from you, and they want it badly. A common person would feel flattered. They would rush to the deal, grateful that someone values what they offer. But you are no longer common. You recognize the leverage. You do not rush. You ask questions. You create space. You let them fill the silence with concessions they did not intend to make. You are the calm at the center of their urgency. And when you finally name your terms, they are not negotiating with a desperate seller. They are negotiating with a sovereign. And that changes the mathematics of the entire exchange. Machiavelli warned that he who is the cause of another becoming powerful is ruined. This applies to every area of your life. Every time you build someone else up at the expense of your own position, you are laying the foundation for your own downfall. This does not mean you should never help others. It means you should never help others in ways that diminish you. It means you should never give away your leverage, your knowledge, or your strategic advantage to someone who has not earned it. It means that when you build alliances, you build them from a position of strength, not from a position of need. Because alliances built on need collapse the moment the need is met. And alliances built on mutual strength endure. This is the difference between the amateur and the master. The amateur reacts to the world, the master shapes it. The amateur plays the hand they are dealt. The master stacks the deck. The amateur hopes for the best. The master prepares for the worst and positions for the best simultaneously. And the master does all of this not because they are heartless, but because they have learned the hardest lesson of all. The world does not care about your feelings. It does not care about your hopes. It does not care about your good intentions. It cares about results. And results are produced by those who understand the terrain, not by those who wish it were different. You are becoming that person. With every word you absorb, with every concept you integrate, the old version of you is dying, and a new version, sharper, colder, more precise, is taking its place. Do not mourn the old version. It served its purpose. It brought you here. But it is not equipped for where you are going. Where you are going requires armor that the old you never wore. It requires a blade that the old you never carried. It requires a vision that the old you never dared to have. Curious to know the exact moves, the precise tactics, the specific words you should use in the moments that matter most. That is precisely what awaits in the next section. And I promise you, it will be the coldest, most surgical, most devastatingly practical material you have ever heard. Now we enter the forge. Everything you have heard until this point has prepared you for what follows. This is where philosophy becomes action, where theory becomes tactic, where the abstract becomes concrete. Because it is one thing to understand that emotional sovereignty is powerful. It is another thing entirely to know exactly what to say when someone tries to provoke you. It is one thing to grasp the concept of strategic patience. It is another to know precisely how to deploy it when the pressure is crushing and every instinct is screaming at you to react. Machiavelli did not write his masterwork so that princes could sit in their libraries and nod in agreement. He wrote it so they could walk into the throne room the next morning and execute. That is what you are going to learn now. Execution. Tactic number 1, the controlled response. When someone attacks you verbally, when someone challenges you in public, when someone tries to humiliate you in front of others, the natural response is to fight back, to match their energy, to escalate. But escalation is the move of the amateur. It is the move of the person who has been hijacked by their own emotions. The controlled response works like this. When someone says something designed to wound you, you pause. Not a short pause. A long one. 3 seconds. 4. Enough to make the silence uncomfortable. You maintain eye contact. Your expression does not change. And then, in a calm, almost disinterested tone, you say one of these phrases. That is an interesting perspective. Or, I hear you. Or simply, noted. That is it. You do not explain. You do not defend. You do not counterattack. You acknowledge without submitting. You respond without reacting. And the effect is devastating. Because the person who attacked you was expecting resistance. They were fueling themselves on your emotional reaction. And you gave them nothing. You became a wall. Their aggression crashed against you and fell to the floor. And everyone in the room saw it. Let me walk you through a specific scenario. You are in a meeting. A colleague, someone who has been undermining you for months, makes a passive-aggressive comment about your work. They say it with a smile. They frame it as a joke. But everyone knows what it is. The old you would have either swallowed the insult and seethed in silence or fired back and created a scene. Both of those responses serve the other person. The first makes you look weak. The second makes you look unstable. Instead, you deploy the controlled response. You pause. You look at them. Not with anger, not with hurt, with curiosity, as if you are studying a specimen. And you say calmly, "That is interesting. Tell me more about what you mean by that." Notice what happens. You have taken their covert attack and forced it into the open. Now they have to explain themselves. Now they have to stand behind the implication. And most people, when forced to own their passive aggression in broad daylight, crumble. They backtrack. They soften. They suddenly claim it was just a joke. And you smile, not a wide smile, a small, knowing smile that says everything without saying a word. You have won, not by fighting, by outmaneuvering. Tactic number 2, the strategic withdrawal. There are moments when the most powerful move is not to engage at all, not to fight, not to negotiate, but to walk away. Machiavelli understood that presence creates familiarity, and familiarity breeds contempt. When you are always available, always responsive, always present, you lose your gravitational pull. You become background noise. The strategic withdrawal is the act of deliberately removing yourself from a situation, a relationship, or an environment in order to create a vacuum. And nature, as we know, abhors a vacuum. When you disappear, when you stop texting, when you stop calling, when you stop showing up where they expect you, something shifts. Curiosity replaces complacency. Concern replaces indifference. The question, "Where are they?" begins to echo in minds that had taken you for granted. Here is how you deploy this in a personal relationship. You notice that someone has been taking your attention for granted. They respond to your messages hours later with minimal effort. They cancel plans without apology. They treat your time as infinite and your patience as inexhaustible. The amateur would confront them. They would have the talk. They would explain their feelings and hope for understanding. Sometimes that works. Often it does not. The strategic withdrawal works differently. You simply become less available. You do not announce it. You do not explain it. You do not punish. You simply redirect your energy. You invest in yourself. You go to the gym more. You work on your projects. You spend time with people who value your presence. And you let the absence do the talking. Because your absence will say things that your words never could. It will say that you have options, that you are not dependent, that your world does not revolve around their approval. And that message, delivered silently, is more powerful than any conversation you could ever have. But here is the critical nuance. The strategic withdrawal only works if you are genuinely withdrawing. If you are checking your phone every 5 minutes to see if they have noticed, you are not withdrawing. You are performing. And people sense performance the way animals sense fear. It leaks. It contaminates. The withdrawal must be real. You must actually be investing in yourself. You must actually be building a life that does not depend on any single person's attention. And when you reach that point, when the withdrawal is authentic, the effect is almost supernatural. People who ignored you begin to pursue you. People who disrespected you begin to recalibrate. Not because you played a trick, but because you became the kind of person who does not need to play tricks. Tactic number 3, the information asymmetry. In every interaction, someone knows more than the other. The person who knows more holds the power. This is not about lying. This is about strategic disclosure. When you are in a negotiation, whether professional or personal, the person who reveals their position first is at a disadvantage. Machiavelli knew this instinctively. He advised princes to listen 10 times more than they speak, to ask questions that reveal the other person's desires without revealing their own, to let the other side talk themselves into a corner while you sit back and map the terrain. Here is a concrete example. You are in a salary negotiation. Your employer asks you what salary you are looking for. The amateur blurts out a number, and the moment they do, they have set a ceiling. The employer now knows the maximum they might have to pay, and they will work to bring that number down. The strategist responds differently. They say, "I would love to understand the full picture first. What is the range you have budgeted for this role?" Now, the employer must reveal their hand, and whatever number they give, you know two things. The real number is higher, and you have anchored the negotiation on their terms, not yours. You have created information asymmetry. You know their range. They do not know yours. And that asymmetry is leverage. Apply this to social situations. When someone asks you a personal question, you do not have to answer it fully. You do not have to lie, but you can redirect. You can give an answer that is true but incomplete. You can share just enough to satisfy curiosity without surrendering the mystery that makes people want to know more. The person who tells you their entire life story in the first conversation has given you everything and received nothing. The person who reveals themselves slowly, strategically, layer by layer, creates an addictive dynamic. People keep coming back because they want to see the next layer. They want to solve the puzzle. And a puzzle that is too easily solved is quickly forgotten. Tactic number 4, the mirror technique. This is perhaps the most subtle and the most devastating tactic in the Machiavellian arsenal. The mirror technique involves reflecting the other person's energy, language, and behavior back at them. When someone is being aggressive, you do not match their aggression. You become calm. Your calm becomes the mirror in which they see their own chaos. When someone is being manipulative, you do not call them out directly. You ask questions that force them to see their own manipulation. When someone is lying, you do not accuse. You repeat their words back to them, slowly, as if considering them for the first time. And you watch as they squirm under the weight of their own dishonesty. Here is a specific dialogue example. Someone tells you a story that you know is not true. They say, "I was stuck in traffic for 2 hours. That is why I missed the event." The amateur says, "I do not believe you." That creates conflict. That puts the other person on the defensive. That makes you the aggressor. The mirror technique works differently. You say, 2 hours in traffic. That sounds really frustrating. Where was the congestion? You are not accusing. You are inviting. You are gently pulling at the thread of their lie, asking for details they did not prepare. And if the story is fabricated, the details will not hold. The lie will collapse under its own weight. And you never had to raise your voice or make an accusation. You simply held up a mirror. Tactic number 5, the preemptive concession. This is advanced Machiavelli. When you know that a confrontation is coming, when you can sense that someone is about to challenge you, you can disarm them by conceding their strongest point before they make it. This sounds counterintuitive. Why would you give up ground before the battle even begins? Because the concession you give is not the one that matters. It is a strategic sacrifice, a pawn given up to protect the queen. Here is how it works. Imagine you are presenting a project at work. You know there is a flaw in your proposal, and you know that someone is going to point it out. Instead of waiting for the attack, you lead with it. You say, "Before we go further, I want to acknowledge that the timeline is aggressive. I know that is a concern, and here is how I plan to address it." By naming the weakness yourself, you have done 3 things. First, you have taken the weapon out of the critic's hands. They were going to use that flaw against you, and now they cannot because you already addressed it. Second, you have demonstrated self-awareness, which is one of the most disarming qualities a person can display. Third, you have controlled the narrative. Instead of the flaw being a surprise attack, it is now a known issue with a proposed solution. You have turned a liability into a demonstration of competence. Now let us talk about the errors you must avoid, because knowing what to do is only half the battle. Knowing what not to do is the other half. The first error is reactive transparency. This is when you reveal your strategy because you are provoked. Someone pushes your buttons, and you blurt out your plans, your feelings, your fears. Every time you do this, you hand them a map of your interior landscape. You show them where the vulnerabilities are. And anyone who knows where you are vulnerable knows how to control you. The second error is inconsistency. Machiavelli warned repeatedly about this. A prince who is generous one day and cruel the next creates confusion, and confusion breeds distrust. Your behavior must be consistent enough to be predictable in the right ways. People should know that you are calm under pressure. They should know that your word is reliable. They should know that you do not make threats you will not follow through on. This consistency is what builds the reputation that precedes you into every room you enter. The third error is mistaking ruthlessness for strength. Machiavelli is often cited as an advocate for cruelty, but this is a shallow reading. He specifically warned that cruelties badly used are those that increase over time rather than diminish. In other words, indiscriminate harshness is not power. It is weakness disguised as power. True strength is precise. It is surgical. It is deployed only when necessary and only to the degree required. The person who is harsh with everyone is not feared. They are resented, and resentment is the seedbed of rebellion. The fourth error is isolation. Strategy is not about cutting yourself off from the world. It is about engaging with the world on your terms. The person who withdraws too completely, who trusts no one, who lets paranoia replace prudence, becomes as weak as the person who trusts everyone blindly. Machiavelli understood that alliances are essential, that information flows through networks, that no prince, no matter how brilliant, can rule alone. The key is to choose your allies with surgical precision, to give trust in measured doses, to build a circle that is small enough to control and powerful enough to sustain you. The fifth error, and perhaps the most dangerous, is believing you have arrived. The moment you think you have mastered the game is the moment the game masters you. Machiavelli watched prince after prince fall, not because they were defeated by a superior enemy, but because they became complacent. They stopped watching, they stopped learning, they stopped adapting, and the world, which never stops moving, rolled over them like a wave over a sandcastle. The master is always a student. The sovereign is always vigilant. The strategist is always learning. At this point, something has changed in you. You can feel it. The way you are processing these words is different from how you processed anything before today. You are not just listening. You are absorbing. You are mapping these concepts onto your own life, your own relationships, your own challenges, and that mapping process is the beginning of transformation, not the end, the beginning. This is the transformation final. What comes next will consolidate everything you have learned and forge it into a new identity, a new way of being, a new version of you that the world is not prepared for. But before we cross into that final territory, let me give you one more tactic that ties everything together. I call it the paradox of vulnerability. Machiavelli is often misread as someone who advocated for total concealment, for wearing a mask at all times, but this is not what he taught. He taught strategic disclosure. And sometimes, the most strategic thing you can disclose is a carefully chosen vulnerability. Not your deepest wound, not your most crippling fear, but a controlled admission that makes you human in the eyes of others while simultaneously deepening your mystique. Here is why this works. People are suspicious of perfection. When someone appears to have no flaws, no doubts, no struggles, others do not admire them. They distrust them. They search for the crack. They want to find the weakness they know must be there. And when they cannot find it, they invent one. They gossip. They speculate. They project their own shadows onto your polished surface. But when you voluntarily reveal a small, carefully chosen imperfection, you disarm that suspicion entirely. You say, in effect, "Yes, I am human. Here is the proof." And that admission, paradoxically, makes you more powerful, because it demonstrates that you are confident enough to show a flaw, that your identity is not fragile, that you can afford to be imperfect because your foundation is unshakable. Consider a leader addressing their team during a crisis. The amateur leader pretends to have all the answers. They project false confidence that everyone sees through. Their team smiles and nods, then whispers in the hallways about how disconnected the leader is from reality. The strategic leader does something different. They say, "I do not have all the answers right now. This is a difficult situation, and I want to be honest about that. But here is what I do know, and here is the plan we are going to execute together." That admission of uncertainty does not weaken them, it strengthens them, because the team now trusts them. They know that when this leader says they are confident, they mean it. And when this leader says they are uncertain, they also mean it. And that consistency of truthfulness becomes the foundation of genuine, unshakable authority. Deploy this in your personal life as well. When you are building a connection with someone, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, the strategic revelation of a small vulnerability creates an instant bond. It invites the other person to lower their own defenses. It creates reciprocity. It says, "I trust you enough to show you this." And that statement, delivered at the right moment, opens doors that no amount of charm or confidence can unlock on its own. But never forget the parameters. The vulnerability you share must be real, but non-critical. It must be relatable, but not pathetic. It must humanize you without diminishing you. The line between strategic vulnerability and oversharing is razor thin, and crossing it destroys the very effect you are trying to create. Share that you struggled with a decision, not that you are paralyzed by indecision. Share that you once doubted yourself in a specific moment, not that you are consumed by self-doubt. Share the battle you fought and won, not the battle that is currently winning. Machiavelli himself practiced this in his correspondence. In letters to friends and allies, he would occasionally reveal frustrations, uncertainties, even moments of despair, but always within the frame of someone who was actively wrestling with fortune, not someone who had been defeated by it. That distinction is everything. You are someone who wrestles. You are someone who fights. You are someone who faces the storm and refuses to break. And when you occasionally show the marks of that fight, you do not become weaker. You become legendary. There is a reason why the most memorable figures in history are not the ones who appeared invincible. They are the ones who were wounded and kept going, who were knocked down and got up, who faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. That narrative, that arc of struggle and triumph, is embedded in the deepest layers of human psychology. When you embody it, when you become the living expression of that arc, people do not just respect you, they follow you, not out of obligation, not out of fear, but out of something far deeper, the recognition that you are the kind of person who walks through fire and emerges not unscathed, but unbroken. Remember this: the world does not follow the flawless. It follows the unbreakable. And the difference between the two is not perfection. It is perseverance fused with strategy, wrapped in the kind of quiet, devastating composure that makes other people stop and wonder what they are missing. You now have the tools. You have the tactics. You have the understanding. But none of it matters unless you apply it, unless you walk into your next interaction with new eyes, unless you respond to the next provocation with calculated calm instead of reactive chaos. Unless you begin, starting now, to live as the strategist you were always meant to be. The final metamorphosis awaits. Stay with me. You are not the same person who pressed play on this video. Something has shifted. Something fundamental. Something that cannot be undone. The person who started listening an hour ago was operating with an incomplete understanding of the world. They were seeing through a glass darkly, to borrow an ancient phrase, navigating a complex and ruthless game with the naive assumption that the rules they were taught were the real rules. They are gone now, and in their place stands someone sharper, someone colder, not cold in the sense of cruelty, but cold in the sense of clarity. The kind of cold that comes when the fog lifts and you see the landscape for what it truly is, not what you wished it were. This is your metamorphosis. And like all true metamorphoses, it is not comfortable. The caterpillar does not enjoy the cocoon. The process of dissolving who you were in order to become who you must be is painful. It requires the death of illusions you once held dear. It requires abandoning the comforting lie that the world is fair. It requires accepting the brutal, liberating truth that the world is a game, and the only choices are to play it well or to be played. Machiavelli knew this moment. He described it in his own life, in his letters, in the quiet desperation of his exile from Florence, when everything he had built was stripped away, and he was left with nothing but his mind and his understanding. And what did he do in that darkness? He did not break. He did not surrender. He sat at his desk night after night, and he wrote. He wrote the book that would change the world. He transformed his suffering into a weapon, his isolation into a forge, his defeat into the raw material for the greatest treatise on power ever written. And that is what you must do now. Whatever you have endured, whatever has been taken from you, whatever wounds you carry from the battles you have fought, you must use them, not as excuses, not as reasons to retreat, but as fuel, as the dark energy that propels you forward into the version of yourself that the world is not prepared for. Let me consolidate what you have learned. Because consolidation is not repetition, it is compression. It is taking the vast territory we have covered and distilling it into a blade you can carry with you everywhere. You have learned that perception governs reality, that the person who controls how they are perceived controls the outcomes of every interaction. This is not vanity. This is architecture. You are the architect of the image the world sees, and from this day forward, you will build that image with the same care and precision that a master craftsman builds a cathedral. Every word you speak, every silence you keep, every room you enter, and every room you leave. All of it is material. All of it is being used, whether you direct the construction or not. The only question is whether you will be the architect, or whether you will leave the design to chance and the judgment of others. You have learned that emotional sovereignty is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. You feel everything. You show only what serves your purpose. The fire still burns inside you. But you choose where to aim it. You choose when to release it. And that choice, that precise, deliberate, calculated choice, is the difference between the person who destroys themselves in anger and the person who channels their anger into unstoppable momentum. You have learned that strategic patience is the most undervalued weapon in the modern world. In an age of instant gratification, of one-click purchases and same-day delivery, the person who can wait, who can endure the discomfort of not acting, who can let the situation ripen before they strike, holds an almost unfair advantage. Because everyone around them is reactive. Everyone around them is desperate. Everyone around them is making impulsive decisions that they will regret in a week. And there you stand, still as a predator before the pounce, waiting for the moment when your move will not just succeed, but will be decisive, irreversible, final. You have learned that information is the true currency of power, not money, not status, not connections, information. The person who knows the most controls the most, and the person who reveals the least controls what others know. This dual mastery of gathering and of guarding is the foundation upon which empires are built. You will become a collector of knowledge. You will pay attention when others are distracted. You will remember what others forget. You will connect dots that others do not even see. And you will use that understanding not to manipulate, but to navigate, to see the currents beneath the surface, to anticipate the wave before it breaks. You have learned that calculated generosity creates bonds stronger than any contract, that giving wisely, strategically, and memorably creates a web of loyalty and obligation that no amount of money can buy. You will give, but you will give like a king. Not because you must, because you can. And every act of generosity will be a stone laid in the foundation of your influence. You have learned about virtù, that untranslatable quality that separates the sovereign from the servant. The combination of skill, will, courage, and adaptability that allows you to seize the moment when fortune presents it and to create the moment when fortune does not. You have this quality inside you. It has been dormant, perhaps, buried under years of compliance and caution. But it is there. I know it is there because you are still listening, because something in you resonated with every word, because you did not flinch. You leaned in. And that is the signature of virtù. And you have learned the tactics, the controlled response that turns aggression into a mirror, the strategic withdrawal that turns absence into a magnetic force, the information asymmetry that turns every negotiation into a chess match you have already won, the mirror technique that turns lies into self-destruction, the preemptive concession that turns weakness into strength, the paradox of vulnerability that turns imperfection into trust. These are not tricks. They are disciplines. And like all disciplines, they require practice. Daily, deliberate, relentless practice. They require you to fail and learn and adjust and fail again and learn again and adjust again until the movements become second nature, until the strategy becomes instinct, until you do not have to think about what to do because the right response flows from who you have become. Now let me share with you the paradox that ties everything together. The deepest truth that Machiavelli understood, but could never say directly, because saying it directly would have destroyed its power. Here it is. The ultimate goal of mastering power is not to dominate others. It is to liberate yourself. Every strategy you have learned today, every tactic, every principle, exists for one purpose and one purpose only: to ensure that no person, no circumstance, and no twist of fate can control you. The person who masters these principles does not become a tyrant. They become free. Free from the need for approval. Free from the chains of other people's opinions. Free from the reactive, desperate, fearful existence that most people mistake for living. They become the author of their own story, the architect of their own empire, the sovereign of their own soul. That is the paradox. The study of power leads not to domination, but to freedom. The mastery of strategy leads not to cruelty, but to peace. The understanding of human nature leads not to cynicism, but to compassion. Because when you truly understand why people behave the way they do, when you see the fear behind the aggression and the insecurity behind the arrogance, you do not hate them. You understand them. And that understanding is the highest form of power, not because it makes you their master, but because it makes you immune to their chaos. Machiavelli spent his final years writing not just about power, but about the human condition, about the comedies and tragedies that make up the fabric of life. He was not a monster. He was a man who saw the world with devastating clarity and had the courage to write about what he saw. And now you have that clarity. You have that courage. You have the tools, the tactics, and the understanding. All that remains is the decision. The decision to walk out of this moment and into the world as a different person. Not different in a superficial sense. Different in the way the earth is different after an earthquake. The surface may look similar, but the foundation has shifted. The terrain has changed, and nothing will ever be quite the same. So let me ask you one final question, not a rhetorical one this time, a real one, a question that only you can answer, in the quiet privacy of your own mind. Who are you going to be tomorrow morning? When the alarm goes off and you swing your legs over the side of the bed and the day stretches out before you like an unmarked page, who will you be? Will you be the person who shrinks from conflict, who swallows their truth, who gives away their power one small surrender at a time? Or will you be the person who walks into every room knowing exactly who they are and exactly what they are worth? Will you be the chess piece or the chess player, the wave or the ocean, the reflection or the source of light? The choice is not made once. It is made every day, every hour, every moment, in every interaction and every silence and every decision. And now that you know what you know, now that you have seen what you have seen, the choice is no longer unconscious. It is deliberate. It is strategic. It is yours. If this message resonated with you, if something in these words struck the steel inside your chest and created a spark, comment below the phrase, "My silence governs worlds." This is not a comment. It is a silent declaration. It is a signal to yourself and to others who have walked this same path that you are no longer asleep, that you have seen the machinery behind the curtain, that you have chosen to be the engineer, not the cog. And by subscribing to this channel, you are not just clicking a button, you are entering a fortress, a place where we declare, without apology and without hesitation, that we are ready to carry the weight of our own power instead of begging for the comfort of someone else's approval. This is not a community for the faint of heart. This is a gathering of those who have chosen to see the world as it is and to forge their path through it with intelligence, with discipline, and with the cold, burning fire of purpose. Go now, and may strategy be your shield, not your cage. May silence be your weapon, not your prison. May knowledge be your compass, not your burden. May you walk through every room you enter with the quiet authority of someone who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. Machiavelli once said that there is no avoiding war. It can only be postponed to the advantage of others. Your war is not with the world. Your war is with the version of yourself that accepted mediocrity. That war ends today, and the version that emerges from this battle, the strategist, the sovereign, the fox and the lion combined, that version will not simply survive. That version will reign. The game has always been playing. Now you know the rules. Now you hold the pieces. Move. But before you close this page, before you return to the noise and the distraction and the comfortable numbness of everyday life, let me leave you with one more truth. A truth that Machiavelli embedded in the very structure of his work, but that most readers miss entirely. The Prince was not written for princes. It was written for the people who would become princes, for the ones who were not yet powerful, but who carried within them the raw material of power, for the commoners who looked at the throne and saw not an impossible dream, but an inevitable destination. For those who understood that power is not something you are born with. It is something you forge, something you build, something you earn through the relentless, disciplined application of intelligence and will. You are that person. You were that person before you pressed play. The difference is that now you know it. Now you have the language for what you always felt. Now you have the framework for what you always intuited. And that framework changes everything, because a sword without a blacksmith is just a lump of metal, and a potential without a strategy is just an unrealized dream. Let me take you through one final exercise. Close your eyes for a moment, not literally, but mentally. Picture the next 30 days of your life. See yourself walking into your workplace, your home, your social circles. But this time, see yourself differently. See yourself moving with intention. See yourself pausing before you speak. See yourself reading the room the way a general reads a battlefield. See the people around you not as threats or friends, but as pieces on a board, each with their own motivations, their own fears, their own patterns of behavior that you are now equipped to understand. See yourself in a confrontation, not flinching, not escalating, but responding with the kind of cold, calibrated precision that leaves the other person stunned. See yourself in a negotiation, not revealing your hand, not scrambling for concessions, but sitting back, asking the right questions, creating leverage from silence. See yourself in a relationship, not chasing, not clinging, not performing, but existing with such solidity, such grounded magnetic presence that people cannot help but be drawn to you. That is not fantasy. That is your next 30 days, if you choose it. And that brings us to the final element of Machiavelli's vision that most people never discuss. Fortune. Machiavelli believed that fortune, which we might call luck or circumstance or fate, governs approximately half of human affairs. Half. The other half, he said, belongs to us, to our will, our preparation, our strategy, our virtue. Most people blame fortune for everything. They say, I was unlucky. They say, the timing was wrong. They say, if only circumstances were different. And in saying those things, they surrender the 50% that was always theirs to control. You are not going to do that anymore. You are going to take your 50% and make it count. You are going to prepare so thoroughly that when fortune favors you, you are ready to seize the moment. And when fortune turns against you, you are ready to endure, to adapt, to find a new path through the wreckage. Because that is what the strategist does. They do not pray for good fortune. They prepare for all fortune. They build their levees before the river floods. They sharpen their blade before the enemy arrives. They study the board before the game begins. And here is the truth that makes all of this worthwhile. The person who takes responsibility for their 50% begins to influence the other 50 as well. Not through magic, through positioning, through the compound effect of thousands of small strategic decisions that put you in the right place at the right time more often than chance alone would allow. Through the reputation you build, the networks you create, the skills you develop, the knowledge you accumulate. All of these things shift the odds in your favor. They tilt the playing field. They do not guarantee victory. Nothing does. But they make victory so much more likely that the distinction between skill and luck begins to blur. Machiavelli saw this with the clarity of a man who had experienced both the heights of political influence and the depths of exile. He knew what it felt like to have fortune's favor and what it felt like to have it withdrawn. And from that experience, he distilled a truth that is as relevant today as it was 500 years ago. The prepared person is the lucky person. The strategic person is the fortunate person. The disciplined person is the blessed person. Not because the universe rewards effort, but because effort creates options, and options create freedom, and freedom is the only wealth that matters. So here you stand, at the threshold. Behind you is the person you were, with all their unconscious habits, their reactive patterns, their naive assumptions about how the world works. Ahead of you is the person you are becoming, armed with the knowledge of centuries, the tactics of strategists, and the fire of someone who has decided, once and for all, to stop being moved and start doing the moving. I want you to understand something about this moment. Most people who hear what you have heard today will do nothing with it. They will nod. They will feel inspired for a few hours. And then the gravity of their old life will pull them back. They will slip into the same patterns, the same reactions, the same surrenders. And a year from now, they will be exactly where they are today, wondering why nothing has changed. That is the path of the majority. And you already know what Machiavelli thought about the majority. They are the river when it is calm, admiring the view, pretending the flood will never come. You are not the majority. You prove that by staying until the end. You prove that by absorbing every word, every concept, every tactic. You proved it by the way these ideas landed inside you, not like stones thrown at a wall, but like seeds falling into prepared soil. That preparation, that readiness, that quiet hunger for something more, that is the mark of the sovereign. And sovereignty is not something I can give you. It is something you claim, here, now. in this moment of decision that no one else will ever see or know about. This is your private revolution, your silent coup, the overthrow of the old regime that has governed your life for too long. There is an ancient concept, older even than Machiavelli, that speaks to this moment. The Romans called it renovatio, renewal, not the replacement of who you are, but the restoration of who you were always meant to be. You are not becoming someone new. You are becoming yourself. The version that was buried under years of compromise and compliance and fear. The version that knew, even as a child, that the world operated on different rules than the ones you were being taught. The version that sensed, even in the quiet moments, that you were meant for something more than the ordinary life that was being laid out before you, like a path already walked by millions. That version is here now, not tomorrow, not next week, now, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, in the silence between the end of these words and the beginning of your next action. That is where the transformation lives. That is where the old gives way to the new. That is where the pawn becomes the player, and the player becomes the master, and the master becomes something that has no name, but that everyone recognizes when it walks into the room. If this message resonated with you, comment below. My silence governs worlds. This is not a comment. This is a declaration, a mark you leave on this page that says you heard, you understood, and you chose to rise. Subscribe to this channel, not because you need entertainment, but because you need a fortress. A place where the principles we discussed today are reinforced, deepened, and refined. A gathering of the awakened, a circle of the strategically alive. Go now. And may the dark wisdom of Machiavelli light your path, not toward domination, but toward the most radical freedom there is. The freedom of a mind that sees clearly, a heart that feels fully, and a will that bends to no one. The game has always been playing. Now you hold the pieces. Move.